The Council's miscalculation, the morning light of Nexus. Prime's artificial sun cast long shadows across the diplomatic quarter as Ambassador Marcus Kane walked through the pristine corridors of the Terran Embassy. His footsteps echoed softly against the polished marble floors, each step measured and purposeful. At 62, Kane had served humanity's interests across the galaxy for over 3 decades, but today felt different. Today carried the weight of inevitability. Kane's aide, Lieutenant Sarah Morrison, approached with a secured datapad clutched in her hands. Her usually composed demeanor showed cracks of concern. Ambassador, the Council's message arrived 20 minutes ago. Priority 1 encryption. Kane accepted the device without breaking stride. He had been expecting this moment for months. The political pressure had been building like a storm system, and storms eventually broke. Thank you, Lieutenant. Please inform the staff that we'll be operating under Protocol 7 as of this morning. Protocol 7. Morrison's eyes widened slightly. She had hoped never to hear those words. It meant the diplomatic phase was ending, and something far more serious was about to begin. Kane settled into his office, a spacious room overlooking the bustling trade district of Nexus Prime. Ships from a dozen different species came and went, their hulls gleaming in the artificial sunlight. Commerce flowed like water, carrying goods, information, and the illusion of peace across the galaxy. He activated the datapad with his biometric signature. The seal of the Galactic Council materialized above the device, followed by the stern visage of Chairman Zephyr. The Altarian's crystalline features reflected the cold authority of his office, each facet of his face catching light like a prism of judgment. When he spoke, his voice carried the resonance of absolute conviction. Ambassador Kane, by unanimous vote of the Galactic Council, the Terran Empire is hereby ordered to withdraw all military and civilian presence from the Outer Rim. Territories designated as Zones 7 Alpha through 12 Gamma. This withdrawal must be completed within 48 standard hours. Failure to comply will result in immediate economic sanctions, followed by military action if necessary. Zephyr's image leaned forward, his multifaceted eyes gleaming with what Kane recognized as barely contained satisfaction. The Council has been patient with humanity's expansionist tendencies, but patience has limits. The Outer Rim belongs to the established galactic community, not to upstart species who have barely learned to navigate between stars. You have 48 hours. The message ended, leaving Kane alone with the weight of the ultimatum. He set the datapad aside and walked to his window, watching the endless dance of ships in the space lanes beyond. 48 hours. They really had no idea what they were dealing with. Kane activated his secure communication system. This is Ambassador Kane, authorization Omega-77. I need a priority channel to Admiral Chen on the horizon's edge. The connection established within seconds, revealing the sharp features of Admiral Sarah Chen aboard her flagship. Even through the holographic transmission, Kane could see the quiet intensity in her eyes. At 45, Chen had earned her rank through a combination of brilliant tactical thinking and an almost supernatural ability to anticipate enemy movements. Ambassador, I assume you've received the Council's gift. Chen's voice carried a note of dark humor. 48 hours, Kane confirmed. Are we ready? We've been ready for 6 months, Chen replied. The question is whether you're ready to stop playing the diplomat and let us remind the galaxy why humans survived the Void Wars. Kane smiled for the first time that morning. Admiral, I've been ready for 20 years. Execute Phase 1, 2. Hours later, Kane stood before the assembled Galactic Council in the Grand Chamber of Nexus Prime's governmental district. The chamber was a marvel of engineering, its domed ceiling displaying a real-time map of the galaxy, while representatives from 47 species occupied tiered seating arranged in concentric circles. At the center sat the Council's ruling body, with Chairman Zephyr presiding from his elevated throne. The chamber buzzed with anticipation. News of the ultimatum had spread quickly through diplomatic channels, and everyone wanted to witness humanity's response, most expected capitulation or desperate negotiation. They were about to be disappointed. Kane approached the speaking podium with the same measured stride he had used that morning. He wore his formal diplomatic uniform, every ribbon and medal earned through years of service to humanity's expansion into the galaxy. When he reached the podium, he didn't immediately speak. Instead, he looked round the chamber, meeting the eyes of representatives from species that had underestimated humanity for decades. Honored Chairman, esteemed colleagues, Kane began, his voice carrying easily through the chamber's acoustic systems. I stand before you today not as a supplicant, but as a representative of a species that has learned survival through trial by fire. Chairman Zephyr's crystalline features shifted into what might have been amusement. Ambassador Kane, your species' history of violence is well documented. We are not here to debate your past, but to address your future compliance with galactic law. Compliance, Kane repeated, as if tasting the word. An interesting choice of words, Chairman. Tell me, when the Void Plague swept through the Terran colonies 50 years ago, killing billions, did the Council offer assistance? An uncomfortable silence settled over the chamber. The Void Plague was ancient history to most species, a footnote in galactic records. To humanity, it was a defining moment. When the Zerathi horde invaded the inner colonies 30 years ago, Kane continued, did the Council's mighty fleets come to our aid, or did they debate jurisdiction while human children died in the rubble of their schools? Chairman Zephyr's crystalline face darkened. The Council operates under established protocols, Ambassador. We cannot intervene in every regional conflict. Regional conflict, Kane nodded slowly. Of course, just as our presence in the Outer Rim is apparently a regional concern that requires galactic intervention. How convenient that the Council's protocols change based on who needs help. The chamber erupted in angry voices from several species representatives. The Cortan delegate, a massive reptilian creature with scales that shifted color with emotion, rose from his seat. The human speaks of ancient grievances, while ignoring current violations of territorial law. Kane turned to face the Cortan directly. Current violations. The Outer Rim territories were unclaimed when our survey ships arrived. We found dead worlds, abandoned stations, and the remnants of civilizations that your ancestors had forgotten. We brought life back to the void, and now you call it theft. You brought military installations and weapons platforms. The Cortons. Scales flashed angry red. You fortified systems that should remain neutral. We protected what we built, Kane replied calmly, just as any species would protect their investments. The difference is that we built something worth protecting. Chairman Zephyr raised his hand for silence. Ambassador Kane, your philosophical arguments are irrelevant. The Council has made its decision. Will the Terran Empire comply with the lawful order to withdraw, or will you face the consequences of defiance? Kane smiled, and something in that expression made several delegates shift uncomfortably in their seats. Chairman, I think there's been a fundamental misunderstanding about the nature of consequences. He activated a small device on his uniform. and the chamber's main display shifted to show a real-time galactic map. Red dots appeared across the galaxy, hundreds of them, each representing a human presence that hadn't been there on the previous day's intelligence reports. "While you've been debating our compliance," Kane said, "humanity has been preparing for your ultimatum. Those red markers represent Terran vessels that have been hidden in deep space for the past 6 months. Ships that your sensors couldn't detect, your intelligence networks couldn't track, and your military strategists couldn't predict." The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. The red dots weren't random. They formed a pattern that encompassed major trade routes, communication, relays, and supply lines throughout Council space. "You see," Kane continued, "humans learned something during the Void Wars that the rest of the galaxy seems to have forgotten. When someone threatens your survival, you don't negotiate. You prepare, you adapt, and when the moment comes, you strike first." Chairman Zephyr's crystalline features had gone completely dark. "You're threatening the entire Galactic Council." "I'm educating them," Kane replied. "For decades, you've seen humanity as a nuisance to be managed. Young species that got lucky with a few technological advances. You've never understood that we're not just another member of your galactic community. We're survivors of a universe that tried to kill us before we ever left our home system." The display shifted again, showing detailed technical specifications that made several military advisors in the chamber gasp. The ships humanity had hidden weren't just numerous. They were advanced beyond anything in the Council's databases. "The Terran Empire has spent the last 50 years developing technologies that don't exist in your archives," Kane explained. "Stealth systems that bend light around our hulls, weapons that can target specific molecular structures, defensive systems that can adapt to any attack in real time. We've been preparing for this moment since the day we realized the galaxy would never accept us as equals." A new voice spoke from the upper gallery. Dr. Elena Busca's humanities chief scientist had entered the chamber with a small team of technical advisors. Her presence was unannounced and unprecedented, but no one moved to stop her. "Ambassador Kane is being modest," Dr. Vasquez said, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had reshaped the laws of physics. "Our preparations go far beyond military applications. We've developed technologies that can shut down entire star systems if necessary. Not destroy them, but simply turn off their technology. Communications, transportation, life support, everything that keeps a civilization running." The implications of her words settled over the chamber like a heavy blanket. The Council wasn't just facing a military threat. They were facing the possibility of technological collapse. Chairman Zephyr rose from his throne, his crystalline form crackling with energy. "You're describing acts of war against the entire galactic community." "No," Kane replied, his voice steady as granite. "I'm describing the consequences of forcing a species that has survived extinction to choose between submission and survival. You've made the mistake of thinking that because we joined your council, we became dependent on your approval." He gestured to the display where the red dots had begun to move in coordinated patterns. Every human colony, every research station, every merchant vessel in the galaxy has been operating under the assumption that someday the Council would try to put us back in our place. We've been preparing for that day. The chamber erupted again, but this time the voices carried panic rather than anger. Representatives who had been confident in their species' superiority suddenly found themselves calculating how many human ships might be hidden in their own systems. Kane raised his hand for silence, and surprisingly, the chamber quieted. "I didn't come here to threaten anyone. I came to offer a choice. The Council can continue to treat humanity as a junior partner to be managed and controlled, or you can accept us as equals and work together to build something better than the stagnant empire you've created. And if we refuse? Chairman Zephyr asked, though his voice had lost much of its earlier confidence. Kane's smile returned, cold and patient. Then you'll learn why evolution favors the adaptable over the established. You'll discover that the species you thought were desperate to join your galactic community were actually preparing to replace it. The display shifted one final time, showing not just the hidden fleet, but the vast network of human colonies, research stations, and industrial facilities that had been quietly growing throughout the galaxy. The Outer Rim territories weren't just distant outposts. They were the foundation of an empire that had been building itself while the Council debated protocol. You have 48 hours to decide, Kane said, echoing the chairman's earlier ultimatum. Not whether humanity will withdraw from the Outer Rim, but whether the Galactic Council will adapt to a new reality or become another footnote in galactic history. Kane turned and walked from the chamber, his footsteps echoing in the stunned silence. Behind him, the greatest deliberative body in the galaxy sat frozen, finally understanding that they had pushed the wrong species too far. In the corridors outside, Lieutenant Morrison waited with a security detail. Her face was pale but determined. Ambassador, all Terran civilians are being evacuated from Council space. Admiral Chen sends word that the fleet is in position. Kane nodded, feeling the weight of history settling around him. Signal all ships, Lieutenant. Phase 2 begins in 12 hours. And send a message to Earth. Tell them the children are coming home. As they walked toward the Terran Embassy's secure levels, Kane allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. The Council had spent decades treating humanity like children who needed guidance and control. They were about to learn that their children had grown up and grown tired of being told what they could and couldn't do. The galaxy was about to change, and humanity would be the ones changing it when humans stop. Playing nice, Admiral Sarah Chen stood on the bridge of the horizon's edge, watching as the last evacuation transport cleared the outer marker of the Nexus Prime system. The merchant vessel's hull gleamed briefly in the light of the system's star before engaging, its jump drive and disappearing into the void. With that ship went the last civilian humans from Council space. All civilian evacuations complete, Admiral, reported Commander Jake Torres from the tactical station. Total evacuated, 2.7 million humans from 43 systems. No casualties. Chen nodded, her dark eyes reflecting the starfield beyond the bridge's transparent aluminum. Viewport. She had been planning this moment for 6 months, ever since intelligence reports suggested the Council was moving toward an ultimatum. The evacuation had been disguised as routine personnel rotations and commercial activities, but in reality, humanity had been quietly pulling its people out of potential harm's way. Signaled the fleet, Chen ordered. Execute Phase 2. Throughout the galaxy, the hidden armada that Ambassador Kane had revealed began to move. Ships that had been drifting in the void between stars suddenly came alive, their engines igniting with the cold fire of antimatter fusion. The vessels were unlike anything in the Council's databases. Their hulls crafted from metamaterials that could shift between complete invisibility and intimidating display depending on operational needs. The first target was the Corton Prime communication relay, a massive structure that coordinated data flow for 17 systems. The Corton had been the most vocal supporters of the ultimatum, their reptilian pride wounded by humanity's refusal to show proper deference. Captain Rex Morgan's stealth cruiser, the Ghostwalker, materialized from nothingness just 50 kilometers from the relay station. Corton Station, this is Captain Morgan of the Terran vessel Ghostwalker. Morgan's voice carried across the communication channels with calm authority. You have 2 minutes to evacuate all personnel. This facility is being claimed by the Terran Empire. The response came in the form of agitated clicks and hisses that the translation system rendered as increasingly creative insults. The Corton commander was apparently more concerned with honor than survival. Morgan sighed and nodded to his weapons officer. Disable their defensive systems. Non-lethal force only. The Ghostwalker's energy weapons lanced out with surgical precision, each beam targeting specific components of the relay's defensive grid. The Corton weapons platforms simply shut down, their power systems severed with the delicate touch of a surgeon's scalpel. Within minutes, the mighty fortress that had guarded the Corton communication network was as defenseless as a newborn. Similar scenes played out across the galaxy. Human ships emerged from hiding to seize control of critical infrastructure, their actions coordinated with the precision of a symphony. Trade routes were blocked, communication networks were severed, and supply lines were cut. The Galactic Council's mighty empire found itself blind, deaf, and paralyzed. On the bridge of the horizon's edge, Chen watched the tactical display as reports flooded in from her task force commanders. Each success was marked by a green indicator on the galactic map, and the green was spreading like a virus through council space. Admiral called Lieutenant Commander Maria Santos from the communications station. We're receiving a priority transmission from Chairman Zephyr, audio only. Chen smiled grimly. Put him through. The chairman's voice filled the bridge, no longer carrying the crystalline clarity of absolute authority. Instead, it crackled with static and the strain of barely controlled panic. Admiral Chen, this is Chairman Zephyr of the Galactic Council. You must cease these attacks immediately. This is an act of war against the entire galactic community. Chairman, Chen replied, her voice carrying the patience of someone explaining basic concepts to a child. This is not war. This is education. War is what happens when one species tries to eliminate another. What we're doing is simply removing your ability to threaten us. You're destroying the infrastructure that keeps billions of beings alive. Zephyr's voice rose to a pitch that made the bridge crew wince. We're disabling the infrastructure that keeps your empire functioning, Chen corrected. There's a difference. Your life support systems are untouched. Your medical facilities are operational. Your food distribution networks are intact. We're simply removing your ability to coordinate oppression. The transmission cut to static for several seconds before Zephyr's voice returned, slightly calmer but no less desperate. What do you want? I want you to understand something fundamental about humanity, Chen said, walking to the tactical display where the green indicators continued to spread. We are not a species that responds well to ultimatums. We are not a species that accepts limitations imposed by others. And we are definitely not a species that will quietly disappear because you find us inconvenient. The Council is willing to negotiate, Zephyr said, the words clearly painful for him to speak. The Council is willing to negotiate now, Chen replied. But 12 hours ago, you were willing to destroy us. The difference is that now you understand the consequences of your actions. On the far side of the galaxy, Dr. Elena Vasquez was putting the finishing touches on humanity's most ambitious project. Deep in the outer rim, hidden within an asteroid field that had been carefully modified to hide its true nature, the Prometheus station hummed with activity. The facility was larger than most space stations, its hull bristling with equipment that represented the pinnacle of human scientific achievement. Dr. Vasquez called her assistant, Dr. James Park, from across the main laboratory. "The quantum resonance generators are online. We're ready to begin the demonstration." Vasquez nodded, her fingers dancing over the control interface with the fluidity of someone who had spent decades mastering the fundamental forces of the universe. "Signal Admiral Chen. Tell her we're ready to show the Council what happens when humans stop playing by their rules." The demonstration began with the Alterian home system, chosen specifically because it was Chairman Zephyr's homeworld. The quantum resonance generators reached across space itself, targeting the unique energy signatures of Alterian technology. The effect was immediate and absolute. Every piece of advanced technology in the system simply stopped working. Ships fell out of hyperspace. Communication systems went silent. Even the artificial gravity generators that kept the space stations habitable shut down. The Alterians found themselves suddenly reduced to the most basic level of technological civilization, dependent on emergency systems and manual controls that few of them remembered how to operate. The mighty species that had ruled the Council for centuries was suddenly as helpless as a colony of insects. "This is Dr. Vasquez to Chairman Zephyr." Her voice carried across the emergency communication channels that humanity had graciously left operational. "What you're experiencing is selective technological suppression. We can target specific energy signatures, specific materials, even specific quantum states. Every piece of technology in your system is currently operating at our discretion." Response came in the form of terrified silence. "Don't worry," Vasquez continued, her voice carrying the dry humor of someone who had just rewritten the laws of physics. "Your life support systems are unaffected. Your medical equipment is functioning normally. Your food replicators are still working. We're not monsters. We're just demonstrating the difference between cooperation and coercion." Back on the horizon's edge, Chen watched as the tactical display showed the complete collapse of Council military response. Ships that had been racing to defend critical installations suddenly found themselves drifting helplessly in space. Communication networks that had coordinated galactic governance for millennia went silent. The mighty Galactic Council had been reduced to a collection of isolated worlds, each one suddenly aware of how dependent they had become on the very species they had tried to control. "Admiral," Commander Torres reported, "we're receiving surrender signals from 17 different species. They're requesting immediate ceasefire and negotiation." Chen nodded, but her expression remained serious. "Maintain positions. We're not interested in surrender. We're interested in recognition." The communication system crackled to life once more, this time carrying multiple voices as various species representatives spoke over each other in their haste to be heard. The Corton delegation was offering trade concessions. The Varian Republic was proposing mutual defense treaties. The Crystalline Collective was suggesting cultural exchange programs. Everyone, it seemed, was suddenly very interested in being friends with humanity. "Silence," Chen commanded, her voice cutting through the cacophony of desperate voices. "You will speak one at a time, and you will speak respectfully. The age of your condescension is over." Chairman Zephyr's voice emerged from the chaos, no longer carrying the authority of absolute rule, but the desperate hope of survival. "Admiral Chen, the Council is prepared to formally recognize the Terran Empire's sovereignty over the outer rim territories. We withdraw our ultimatum and apologize for any ... misunderstanding." "Misunderstanding," Chen repeated, her voice carrying the weight of decades of accumulated grievances. Chairman, the only misunderstanding was your belief that humanity would accept subjugation. We are not a species that kneels. What are your terms? Zephyr asked, the words emerging like physical pain. Chen gestured to Commander Torres, who began transmitting a document that had been prepared months in advance. The Terran Accords, she announced. Complete sovereignty for the Terran Empire over all territories currently under our control. Formal recognition of human technological superiority. Restructuring of the Galactic Council to include equal representation for all species, with decisions made by consensus rather than majority rule. She paused, letting the implications sink in. And most importantly, the establishment of the Galactic Protection Protocols. Any species that threatens the existence of another will face immediate intervention by the combined forces of the galaxy. The age of extinction wars is over. The silence that followed was profound. For the first time in galactic history, the strongest military force was proposing to use its power to protect the weak rather than dominate them. There is one final condition, Chen continued. The Council will publicly acknowledge that humanity's expansion into the Outer Rim was not aggression, but survival. You will admit that you tried to destroy us because you feared our potential, not because we threatened your safety. The admission came slowly, painfully, but it came. One by one, the species that had supported the ultimatum acknowledged their error. The court and delegates spoke of wounded pride. The Varian representative mentioned concern about technological disruption. The crystalline collective admitted to fear of human unpredictability. Chairman Zephyr's voice was the last to be heard, carrying the hollow sound of absolute defeat. The Galactic Council formally acknowledges that the Terran Empire posed no threat to galactic stability. Our actions were motivated by fear and prejudice, rather than legitimate security concerns. We apologize. Chen closed her eyes briefly, feeling the weight of history settling around her. Apology accepted, Chairman, but not forgotten. The galaxy will remember this day as the moment when might began to serve right instead of the other way around. The restoration of Council systems began immediately. Human ships that had been holding critical infrastructure released their control, allowing normal operations to resume. The quantum suppression fields were lifted, returning advanced technology to species that had suddenly realized how vulnerable they were without it. Trade routes reopened, communication networks came back online, and the galaxy began to function normally once more. But nothing was truly normal. The balance of power had shifted permanently. The species that had once dominated the galaxy found themselves in a new reality where human approval was necessary for any major decision. The Outer Rim territories were no longer disputed frontier zones, but the industrial heartland of the galaxy's newest superpower. On the bridge of the horizons, Edge, Chen stood before the tactical display that now showed a galaxy forever changed. Green indicators marked the positions of human ships, no longer hidden but openly patrolling the space lanes. The Terran Empire had announced its presence to the galaxy, and that presence would never again be ignored. Admiro, Commander Torres said quietly, "We're receiving a message from Ambassador Kane. He's requesting permission to return to diplomatic duties." Chen smiled, the first genuine expression of joy she had allowed herself in months. "Tell the ambassador that the galaxy is ready for his brand of diplomacy, and tell him that this time he'll be negotiating from a position of strength." As the horizon's edge turned toward home, Chen reflected on the lessons of the day. The galaxy had learned that humanity would not be pushed around, would not be intimidated, and would not quietly accept extinction. But more importantly, they had learned that human strength would be used to protect rather than dominate. The Galactic Council had pushed the Terran Empire, expecting submission. Instead, they had awakened a sleeping giant that would reshape the galaxy in its image. The age of human subjugation was over. The age of human leadership had begun. And across the galaxy, on 1,000 worlds and in 1,000,000 ships, beings of every species looked up at the stars with a new understanding. The humans were no longer the newest members of the galactic community. They were its guardians, its protectors, and its future. The council had gotten burned, but from those ashes, something better had emerged. A galaxy where strength served justice, where power protected the weak, and where the word human would never again be spoken with condescension. They had pushed the Terran Empire, and the galaxy would never be the same.